I was asked by a couple of the yacht clubs here in the Ottawa area to ask if I would give a presentation on my seagoing experiences. So I thought to make it easier, if I would present you with several pictures of my life of different types of ships that I sailed on, starting with the sailing boats, and from that we could give you a pretty good idea of what I did. This particular picture here, I thought it'd be appropriate to show it because it's the Gospel Compass, and this came out of my father's home, and that generation of seamen, my father's generation, they had great belief and faith and respect for the sea, and most homes in Newfoundland and fishing schooners, you'd find one of these pictures of the Gospel Compass, and also they have another picture of the Gospel ship. So I thought it appropriate in this case because all seamen and sailors and ships need a compass, and what better compass to have than the Gospel Compass? So this is why I picked that particular picture to start the presentation. This picture here is the harbor of my hometown in Grand Bank, Newfoundland. If you look to the far right there, there's a breakwater there. That was a pretty rough harbor when the wind was up to the northeast. So after Confederation in '49, they lobbied to have a breakwater put out in front of the Western Pier there to make it much smoother water in the harbor. But that's what the harbor looks like today. There's not much traffic there. You can see one trawler where she's tied up there. That's the fish plant. But that's the type of vessel you use in there now. But at the beginning, that was just a brook running out. Can't see it there, but there's a bridge right there in front, and that's called Grand Bank Brook. And after they turned the brook into a bit of a harbor. That's what the same harbor looked like. If you look to the right, you can see the two piers, Eastern Pier, the lighthouse on it, and the other one is the Western Pier, minus the breakwater. But that's what I grew up to. That's Grand Bank Harbor in there now. I lived about 5-minute walk from the waterfront, and in there's about 26 to 30 fishing schooners. And if you look further down, you can see a couple of steamboats in there, and they're loading dry fish for Europe. This is the same harbor, little schooners. These two schooners in the front there. The one on the inside was the Nina Corkum, which my father sailed for a number of years, and was the first ship that I was skipper of. The next one outside there was the Pauline C. Winters. In fact, if you remember Bob Winters, the politician here in Ottawa, that was his father's schooner out of Lunenburg, and she's called after Bob Winters' sister. And far down, you can see the two steamships that was loading. There's just one, I think, one there now. This is a schooner that they had built for my father, Mr. Forsey. The man there blowing his nose on the lumber there. He was the principal owner, and my dad was sailed with him since 1913. He was first in command of one of the schooners that this man owned. My father was a very, very good fisherman, and he always had new schooners. Most of the schooners in Newfoundland were, as you can see in the background, there's many of them in Lunenburg Harbor. And after the Lunenburgers, captains sailed their vessels, 8-10 years old, they would sell them off to different parts of the world, and most of them went to Newfoundland. But if you see on the back end of the boat the day she was launched, my dad there, right on the stern section there. But she was also launched on the day of the Sumi they had in Newfoundland, 1929, 18th of November, 1929, and where they had the Sumi out on the Grand Banks erupted the sea bottom, which caused a lot of devastation on the south coast of Newfoundland. The last picture you saw was built in 1929, but this is where she went fishing the first year in 1930. You can notice she's everything is set to sail now. She's actually been sailing to the fishing banks, and I think that's where it's anchored in a place called Bjorn, probably around June month, looking for the capelin that comes in for the bait. But she's a brand new vessel, but a beautiful vessel. This is the same slide, and I separated it because I wanted the Ellen Forsey alone, but this is a Lunenburg schooner, the R.N.M. Corcoran, that was purchased out of Lunenburg by another firm, and pretty similar vessel, but not near as pretty as the Ellen Forsey. This is the Nina Corcoran, again, back in 1940. My father was skipper on her. I was with him at the time, and he took cancer, so he had to leave the vessel after the first trip in the spring. We usually went fishing from March till October. And on his first trip he went out, he had cancer, and he got winter, and of course he went and checked with the doctors after he came home and had returned, so he had to leave the vessel and go to Halifax for radium treatment. So it was beginning of the season, so the guy that should have taken the boat was second in command, but he didn't have nerve enough to do it, so I didn't have any nerve or didn't have anything else either at that time. So I was only 20 years old, and I said, well, if he doesn't do it, I'll do it. And so people that had the biggest entry in the boat, the Buffetts, they agreed I could take it if the insurance would back them. So I did. This is me at 20 years old on the same boat. We're standing up in the main boom of the mainsail. The man to the far right is the man that should have done it. He was a very, very good sailor, very competent in every way. I would have thought he would have grabbed a chance because he was a younger man, but he was probably 10 years older than me or a little more. But it would have been a great chance for him to get a start as ship's command, because that was what most of the fishermen, they were looked to be one day have their own boat. And the other guy, of course, is the cook. He was a very good cook from Grand Bank. And but anyway, I show that because here I was 20 years old on the other side. But I was very lucky. I had a good crew, 24 men. Some of them were old enough to be my grandfather, but I made it clear to them that I was going to be the skipper, and I was going to be a young one, and there's only one skipper at any one time. So it worked out pretty good. And by the way, at the end of the season, there was about maybe 25 to 30 vessels sailing out of Grand Bank, and I caught more fish on that year than any other. I was a highline fisherman that year. This is the same boat, the same harbor. Grand Bank, you can see, is a little bit closer up, but the vessel there in the front is the Nina Corcoran. Because later years after I left home, they took the big mainsails off and cut the mast down, and they had just these small sails. They didn't rely on the sails for getting around during these years. So now they have auxiliary power. They have diesels. I think she had two small diesels put in her. Made pretty good speed, almost 10 knots. But the sails were more or less not really depending on it all. They were more or less steadying sails in bad weather. This is a schooner belonging to another firm that just come in from the banks, and she is loaded down with fish. But that was a tidal port, and what happened here is she's coming in and the tide is already falling. There's no danger here. It's just that she's loaded heavy, drawing about 15 feet of water in that area. So she just came in, she sailed in, and she grounded in the between the two piers. Actually, now when the tide comes up, she'll float, and they'll just take some lines ashore and put her into docks. And then in the background you can see two three-masted ships, one right in front, another one to the left. And those were the vessels. They never went fishing. Those were the foreign-going ships that carried the product to Europe mostly and the Caribbean, which was salt cod at the time, and brought back different types of cargo. But they traveled all over the world. This one here is, you can see, it's a fishing schooner anchored on the Grand Banks. Nice clear day. You can see the fish on the deck. You can see the dories up front there. They're getting ready to set their trawls out there. They put the dories out, and if you notice, they're in the right-hand corner. That's the trawl lines that they will set out from the boat. They usually go off from the boat about probably a half a mile, and they anchor one end of the trawl, and then they go in a different direction. They have their course parter going out, and they row their trawl in that direction. And for about 2 miles, they lay down about 2 miles of trawl, and they anchor each end. And of course, the codfish being the ground fish, the trawl is let down on the anchors to about a couple of feet off the bottom. Each trawl line has probably a couple of thousand of fish hooks hanging down from the main line with a piece of bait on it. That's how they entice the fish to, and they get caught on the hook, of course, and then they go back and visit and take the fish off. You can see the deck load of fish to the right there. But this particular vessel has already got auxiliary power. If you notice, you can see the smokestack there, and the main boom is there with no sail on it. So that's an indication that they're going to auxiliary now instead of sail. But that's an average type and size vessel. She's got about 11 doors. If you count the door, you'll find about 11 of them on there. As you can notice, this schooner here is anchored, and she has no sails on. You can see the main boom and the gaffs and that sort of thing. She's now probably there for the winter, laid up for the winter. So anyway, usually in the wintertime, or in the fall of the year, late in the fall, they would strip the vessels down of their fishing gear, and they would anchor them there for the winter. Sometimes they put them into the dock, but in that particular place they used to, was a sheltered harbor, so they just anchored them, and very seldom rose over. But if you notice, the name of the vessel was the Marion Bell Wolf, another one of the Lunenburg schooners that was purchased in Newfoundland by one of the fishing firms. But if you notice, there's a house tied to her at the back, and that was in November of 1929, and when the Sami came ashore in Bjorn and Lemelin, and that house was washed off its, I guess it was close to the shoreline, but anyway, could have been further in though, because a big sea came in and rolled up the shore and took this house out, and the people were still in it. Somebody saw the house, and they hailed somebody from the bedroom windows, and the boat went out and took the people out to the bedroom windows, as the story goes. And to save the house, the boat towed the house out to the schooner, moored it to the schooner. So after things quietened down, they brought the house back inshore and set it back up again. Probably still in existence. This is a picture just painting actually showing the dangers of the fishing schooners on the Grand Banks. We would anchor there to set their trawls out, of course, and they're right in line with the ships, the big ships going to cargo ships and passenger ships going from Liverpool, Southampton to New York. And they would cross over to the Grand Banks, and of course, in those days there was no radar, so they couldn't see during the foggy weather. And they would many times run into these wooden schooners, and they would even know they touched them, actually. This particular vessel here was one my father sailed L.A. Dunton during the war years, and he was very successful during the Second World War. I actually sailed on that ship as well. This is the ship that's down in Mystic, Connecticut now as a museum piece. She was built originally in the United States, in Essex, Massachusetts. But she's now as one of the museum pieces in Mystic, Connecticut. But you can see there's 3 vessels there. And I remember the experience I had with my father the first year I went out. This big ship like this one is blowing our whistle in the fog every couple of minutes, and we knew by taking bearings on the vessel that she was heading right for us. And she came so close that the sound of the whistle came so close that we all left the vessel anchored on the banks and took off in the dories. But she missed us. And after she passed, the whistle went by, and cleared the vessel. We went back and bought our ship again, our schooner. But these were trying times for the fishermen. They were big dangers. This particular boat is a schooner owned by a company out of Grand Bank, Samuel Harris and Sons. And this is an American vessel. They sold a lot of their vessels to Grand Bank too. They're different types. Actually, they were better built ships than Lunenburg, because the American vessels were built out of white oak, whereas the Lunenburg vessels were built out of birch and spruce, and they didn't last long. But this particular ship was called the Victoria. Captain George Rowe was the skipper on that. She was she was anchored on the Grand Banks during a bad storm. And of course, during stormy weather, they didn't fish the dories. The dory stays on deck. But it was a foggy day. Some of the crew was on deck, and they thought they heard somebody hailing or hollering in the fog. So they went and told the skipper, and the skipper said, they told the skipper, they said, there's somebody out there, in trouble because we heard the hollering. So the captain said, well, it's too rough to send any dory out looking for someone in the fog that didn't know where they were. So he said, well, throw out a dory, take all the things out of her, all the gear out of her, and they threw out the dory, and they tied a buoy line. That's a buoy line where they anchor a line that they anchor their trawl. It's a fair-sized line, about probably ½ inch in diameter. But they got miles of this stuff aboard of the boat, so they tied this to the dory, and the wind and the waves took the dory astern of the ship. They slacked out about maybe a mile, a little more, and then the captain said, well, pull it back in. There's little chance that it ever caught up. But anyway, luck should have it. When they pulled the dory back about a mile and a quarter, they took quite a little while. We should be attached to the dory but these 2 fishermen that was lost off another ship. And the dory being light, and their dory was heavier, and of course they probably tried to pull the dory back to that ship. Lucky the dory drifted by them, they grabbed it, tied the dory to it, and when they pulled it back, they had 2 dories with the 2 men in the back. So it was a marvelous thing that happened. Yeah, this is in St. John's Harbor, probably in the summer of time around June month. As you can notice that there's no wind. They were laying calm outside of St. John's Harbor, and it was coming on the evening. In them days, there was no auxiliary power, so the crew all got the dories out, and there's 11 dories there. I think you can see 10 there, but so they got a hold of the boat and towed her in the St. John's Harbor. So they had the night ashore after being out to sea for probably 3 weeks, and I think the name of the boat is the Robert and Max. She was originally called the Clara B. Creaser, that came from Lunenburg and bought in Newfoundland by one of the firms. The skipper that first sailed there she was renamed for his 2 sons, the Robert and Max. And also she was the first casualty of the war. She wasn't fishing then. She was carrying a load of dry fish over to Portugal. And about 300 miles north of the Azores, a German submarine came up. There was only 7 of a crew on board then. The captain was able to come aboard the submarine with his documentation and went aboard. Of course, they found that he was a British ship in Newfoundlander registry. And of course, they sank the ship. But there was a pretty good skipper on the submarine, because he offered to tow them in their boat towards the Azores. He gave them the course and offered to tow them, but the captain decided that he was afraid to take that chance, because the the submarine commander said, you know, if we see a plane come over, then he said, we have to dive. And he said, you know, you have to take a chance to you go down with us. But anyway, the captain was a pretty astute guy, and he said, no, thank you very much. But they gave him some food and some water. He was a good guy. And the guy that was captain number was a guy immigrated from Denmark to Grand Bank. Captain Harry Thomason was the skipper. Very good man. This one here is a kind of a bad story about that. That's another, not Lunenburg, vessel that was built in the United States, Essex, Massachusetts. And her name is the Marion. And if you look closely at the stern, there's another ship just by the stern. And it was about the coming in of the draggers at that time, in the early 1900s. And that ship and the dragger was in St. Pierre in the spring. In March, when they usually stopped in St. Pierre for the supply of rum and tobacco, which was cheap at that time. And all these guys, most of these guys, I should say, that they were hard drinkers and they partied a lot. And anyway, the captain of this schooner and that captain of the dragger were into a bar or tavern in St. Pierre, and they got into an argument about fishing, I suppose, and boats and one thing and the other. They parted on bad terms, went to sea, and the captain of the trawler threatened the captain of the Marion that he would get even with him, and apparently sailed during that day or that night, and he had a heavier boat, on a power boat. He ran into him and sunk her, and all the crew was lost, 25 men. This never came out until, well, they suspected, because there was other fishermen and captains around who heard the arguments and heard the threat that he would get even. And of course, when she didn't show up after the voyage, they figured something happened like that. So anyway, what happened, they confronted the skipper, and of course, there was no proof, and this captain died. He said, no, he never did anything to the Marion. But anyway, when he died in 1934, on his deathbed, he confessed that he actually did sink the Marion. It was a sad thing, actually. This is the famous Bluenose, and one of the first pictures of the Bluenose back in 1921 when she was built. She's getting ready for the racing. It's a beautiful picture of her showing all her sails. She's carrying about, it's around Halifax area. I think she's off Halifax there, going out to Halifax Harbor. I think she carried at that time around 10,000 feet of square sail on there. That's a lot of sail on the boat like that. This is another one of the Bluenose, of course. Her and her rival, the Gertrude L. Theobald, and the far one with number 2 on the sail is the Gertrude L. Theobald, was built especially to try and beat the Bluenose. See, the racing started in 1920. Well, how it all started was America's Cup. We're going to race off in New York, I think around 1920, 1999, something like that. And it was canceled because the wind got up to about 25 knots. They said it was too much wind for the race, so they canceled it. So when the fishermen in Lunenburg and Gloucester heard that, they made fun of them because the wind was just moderate breeze for a schooner. So there was a senator, I forget his name, he was the owner of Halifax Herald. He put up a cup. They put up a cup, a fisherman's cup. It was you had to be a fisherman. You had to have a schooner that sailed to the banks and did at least 1 year of fishing before they could qualify. Anyway, he put up this cup. The first race was between the schooner from Lunenburg, or from Gloucester, called the Esperanto, and the elimination race. She won the elimination races. And then the schooner in Lunenburg, out of all the fishing schooners in Lunenburg, was the Delawana. So she came over from Gloucester to Nova Scotia, and they sailed the racetrack. And of course, the Esperanto won the race, the American. So they took the cup over to the United States, and that's when the Bluenose came into being. And after that, they decided that they should build the Bluenose. I don't know how they came up with the name, but they built a schooner to beat the Esperanto. and would be a comfortable fishing schooner too. You had to meet certain requirements because if you built it too yachty and it wasn't comfortable for the men to use as a working vessel, you weren't able to go into race either. But anyway, they built the Bluenose, and